Welcome to today's deep dive. We are really thrilled you could join us for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Because our mission today is to jump into this massive stack of physiological, historical, and medical sources. We're decoding the single dual-purpose organ tucked quietly right behind your stomach. We are, of course, talking about the pancreas.
Right.
Specifically, we're going to explore how your body manages its fuel supply through this incredibly delicate, microscopic hormonal tug of war, primarily using insulin and glucagon.
Yeah, it's a biological balancing act that you never really have to think about, yet it's literally keeping you alive every single day. And what makes these sources so captivating is that mapping out this system, it wasn't just some straightforward scientific process.
Not at all.
No, it's a story marked by, accidental discoveries, bitter professional rivalries, and the profound, sometimes really stubborn evolutionary logic of the human body.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the pancreas, you really have to picture a massive industrial complex.
I like that analogy, yeah.
Right. Like usually when you walk into a sprawling factory, you just assume the most important work is happening right out on the main floor. It's loud, it takes up like 98% of the square footage, and it is churning out millions of gallons of product.
And that overwhelming main floor that represents the exocrine tissue of the pancreas. These are called SNR cells.
SNR cells, okay.
Yeah, and they act like industrial pumping stations. By volume and by daily workload, the primary job of the pancreas is actually digestion.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. These cells are constantly pouring potent enzymes like trypsin to break down proteins, lipase for fats, and amylase for carbohydrates. They pour all that directly into your small intestine.
But imagine bypassing all that noise, right? You walk down a hidden hallway and you find a tiny, highly classified security room. It takes up maybe, 1 or 2% of the entire building?
Barely 2%, yeah.
But the people inside that microscopic room are secretly controlling the energy grid for the entire city.
Which is just the absolute definition of hiding in plain sight.
Complete.
That hidden security room represents the endocrine tissue. And it's organized into roughly 1 to 2 million microscopic clusters that are just floating in that sea of digestive cells. We call them the islets of Langerhans.
See, it honestly sounds like a location in a high fantasy novel, like the Islets of Langerhans.
It really does.
But it actually comes from a 22-year-old German medical student.
Hmm.
His name was Paul Langerhans. So in 1869, he was examining pancreatic tissue under a microscope, and he spotted these odd, pale clumps of cells that looked, well, completely different from the surrounding digestive tissue.
Right, and he documented them beautifully in his doctoral thesis, but he had absolutely no idea what they did.
Not at all.
No, he described them merely as an anatomical curiosity. And for 2 decades, the scientific community basically just left it at that.
Yeah, fast forward to 1889, and a breakthrough happens entirely by accident.
A very messy accident.
Very. We're in Strasbourg with 2 physiologists, Oskar Minkowski and Joseph von Mering. They're running an experiment on fat digestion, so they strategically surgically remove a dog's pancreas. They expect the dog to have digestive issues, which it does. But weeks later, a lab assistant notices something incredibly weird happening in the dog's kennel. Swarms of flies are relentlessly gathering around this specific dog's urine.
Right, so Minkowski decides to test the urine and realizes it is absolutely saturated with sugar.
Wow.
By removing the pancreas, they had inadvertently caused the dog's blood sugar to spike so high that its kidneys could no longer filter it all out.
That's crazy.
So the sugar was literally spilling into the urine, which is the classic hallmark of diabetes mellitus.
I mean, that moment had to be mind-bending for them. It proved the pancreas wasn't just a digestive factory. It was secretly producing some invisible substance that controlled the entire body's blood sugar.
Exactly.
But this raises a massive logistical question for me. Like, if they knew in 1889 that the pancreas held the key, why did it take more than 30 years for anyone to actually find and extract the hormone doing the work?
Well, it comes right back to your factory analogy, honestly. That 98% of the pancreas dedicated to producing harsh digestive enzymes. That made extraction nearly impossible. Every time researchers tried to grind up the pancreas to isolate this mysterious blood sugar hormone, the physical trauma would activate those digestive enzymes.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they would literally chew up and destroy the hormone before it could ever be separated out.
So the factory floor was basically shredding the classified documents the moment anyone tried to read them.
Precisely. The organ was literally destroying its own secrets.
Man. Which sets the stage for 1921 at the University of Toronto. You have this incredibly unlikely team coming together in a sweltering summer lab.
The famous Toronto team, yes.
Right, so there's a surgeon named Frederick Banting, a medical student named Charles Best, a senior physiologist named J.J.R. McLeod, and a biochemist named James Collip. And Banting's brilliant idea to get around those digestive enzymes was to surgically tie off the pancreatic ducts in dogs, wait weeks for the digestive tissue to wither away and die.
Which is pretty gruesome, but effective.
And then extract the hormone from the surviving islets of Langerhans.
Yeah, and the physical and emotional toll of that summer,
Yeah.
it just cannot be overstated. They were macerating tissue in a hot attic, dealing with constant failures, but they slowly refined a crude extract of what we now call insulin.
And the stakes for this research were just unimaginably high. At the time, a diagnosis of what we now call type 1 diabetes was a guaranteed death sentence.
Unavoidable. The only treatment available was a starvation diet,
Yeah.
sometimes as low as 400 calories a day, just to delay the inevitable coma.
Which brings us to January 11, 1922, and the case of Leonard Thompson. He was a 14-year-old boy dying in a Toronto hospital ward. He weighed just 65 pounds.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. His blood glucose was measured at around 520 milligrams per deciliter. Now, for you listening, a healthy fasting blood sugar is usually between 70 and 100. Leonard was at 520.
Yeah, he was severely malnourished, and his breath smelled heavy with acetone, which is a sign his body was desperately burning fat because it couldn't use any sugar at all.
Wait, why couldn't it use the sugar?
Because without insulin, the cells in your muscles and tissues are essentially locked. The sugar is flooding the bloodstream, but it can't cross the cell membrane. So Leonard's body was literally starving in a sea of plenty.
So they administer the first injection of the new pancreatic extract. But it's too impure, right? It barely drops his blood sugar, and it actually causes a severe, painful abscess at the injection site.
Right. It looked like another total dead end. The medical team was devastated.
I can imagine.
But James Collip, the biochemist, he just refused to give up. He went back to the lab and worked feverishly, using varying concentrations of alcohol to precipitate out the impurities and leave a cleaner insulin extract.
And then 12 days later, on January 23, they try again with Collip's purified batch. And within 24 hours, Leonard's dangerously high blood sugar plummets into the normal range.
It's incredible.
His symptoms reverse. He gains weight. He basically gets his life back. It is arguably the most rapid, dramatic medical translation in history, going from animal models to pulling a child back from the brink of death in just months.
It remains a stunning achievement today. But, the aftermath was notoriously fractured.
Oh, yeah, the drama.
Yeah, the 1923 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded for the discovery of insulin. But the Nobel Committee only recognized Banting and McLeod.
That is so wild to me.
They completely snubbed Charles Best and James Collip, the student and the biochemist, who were, frankly, elbow deep in the actual extractions and purifications.
And the professional jealousy was so toxic, the sources say Banting was so furious about Best being excluded that he publicly announced he would split his prize money with him.
Right, which then pressured McLeod to split his share with Collip.
Exactly. But beyond the Nobel drama, there is a detail in the source material about the insulin patent that feels incredibly heavy when you look at the world today. The team sold the patent for insulin to the University of Toronto for a token amount of exactly $1.
Yeah, their explicitly documented intent was to ensure that this life-saving extract could never be monopolized. They believed it belonged to the world, and they wanted it accessible to literally anyone who needed it.
I mean, it is an undeniable stark contrast to the modern reality in the United States, right? Where the skyrocketing price of insulin vials has become this massive, often painful flashpoint in health policy.
Oh, absolutely.
Setting all the complex modern pharmaceutical economics aside, just looking at the founder's original intent of a $1 patent, it leaves quite a legacy.
It really does. And, while insulin was immediately thrust into the global spotlight, another crucial discovery happened right on its heels that was just entirely ignored.
Oh, glucagon.
Yes. In 1923, researchers Kimball and Merlin identified a second substance in these pancreatic extracts. But this substance didn't lower blood glucose, it raised it.
And they called it glucagon, kind of a mashup of glucose agonist.
Yep.
But nobody cared. Like for decades, scientists viewed glucagon as nothing more than an annoying lab impurity.
Exactly.
They just wanted to scrub it out of their insulin batches.
Which was a massive oversight, because biology doesn't work in one direction. Glucagon is the essential other half of the system.
So to really grasp how this dual system works inside your body right this second, we have to look at the machinery. At its core, your blood glucose regulation is a negative feedback loop, right? Insulin and glucagon are the two opposing dials controlling your energy grid.
That's a great way to put it. Think of insulin as the body's feast signal. It is the hormone of storage and abundance. Glucagon is the starvation or mobilization signal.
Okay, let's follow the feast signal first. Inside those tiny islets of Langerhans, about 50 to 70% of the cells are beta cells.
Right, the insulin factories.
Right. When you eat a meal, say a piece of bread, it breaks down into glucose in your gut and enters your blood. As that blood washes over the pancreas, these beta cells sense the sugar spike directly.
And the cellular mechanics here are a masterpiece.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so the glucose actually enters the beta cell and is immediately metabolized. That metabolism creates ATP, which is just basic cellular energy. As ATP levels rise inside the cell, it physically forces these potassium channels on the cell membrane to close.
Okay.
And trapping that potassium changes the electrical charge of the cell, depolarizing it.
So it's literally a microscopic Rube Goldberg machine. The sugar is the marble that hits the ATP domino, which swings the potassium door shut.
I love that. Yes. And that shutting door triggers the next step. The change in voltage forces a different set of doors, calcium channels, to spring open.
Oh, wow.
So calcium rushes into the cell, and that flood of calcium acts as the final trigger, pushing stored vesicles of insulin out of the cell and into your bloodstream.
And once insulin is in the blood, it travels throughout the body and binds to receptors on your muscle and fat cells, right?
Exactly.
When it binds, it signals these proteins called GLUT4 transporters. They act like little doors that physically rise to the surface of the cell, open up, and pull the glucose out of the blood and into the tissue where it can be burned for energy.
Right. And its effect on the liver is equally important. Insulin signals the liver to begin a process called glycogenesis.
Glycogenesis?
Yes, taking loose glucose molecules and stitching them together into long, compact chains of glycogen for long-term storage. And at the exact same time, insulin actively suppresses gluconeogenesis, which is the liver's natural ability to manufacture brand new sugar.
Wait, hold on. Glycogenesis and gluconeogenesis?
Now I know.
Those sound completely identical, and I know I'm going to mix them up. Are you basically saying one process builds the sugar tower for storage, and the other process generates sugar from scratch?
That is the perfect way to look at it, honestly.
Yeah.
Glycogenesis builds the storage tower. Gluconeogenesis creates new sugar from raw materials.
Okay.
So insulin commands the liver to build the storage tower and completely halt the creation of new sugar.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate signal that says, we have plenty of fuel right now, store it away and stop making more.
Got it. But we all run a live demonstration of the opposite signal, the starvation signal, every single night.
We do.
Like, if you're listening to this on your morning commute, your body has been relying on this second mechanism for hours.
Exactly. When you eat dinner and go to sleep, you enter an 8 to 12-hour fasting period where no new fuel is entering the system. But your brain doesn't stop.
Right.
It is a massive energy hog that burns glucose almost exclusively, and it cannot store any of its own.
So this is where the alpha cells step up. They make up about, 15 to 20% of the islet cells?
Okay. Right.
When they sense your blood glucose dropping in the middle of the night, they secrete glucagon, the formerly annoying impurity.
The hero of the night shift. Glucagon travels straight to the liver and flips every switch in the opposite direction. It triggers the breakdown of those stored glycogen towers back into usable glucose.
Wow.
And it ramps up gluconeogenesis, forcing the liver to build brand new glucose out of amino acids and fat byproducts. The liver then drips that sugar back into your bloodstream, keeping your brain perfectly fueled until you wake up for breakfast.
And just to keep everything from spiraling out of control, there is a third resident in those tiny islet clusters, right? Delta cells. They secrete a hormone called somatostatin, which acts as a local referee. It dampens down both insulin and glucagon, so the system doesn't overreact to a meal or a fast.
It is a beautifully calibrated system that highlights a major historical misconception, really. In the early 20th century, insulin was viewed strictly as a diabetes drug.
Oh, sure.
But it is actually a fundamental, general-purpose physiological signal for storage and growth in every human being.
Here is where the sources highlight a really fascinating asymmetry, though. We have this elegant feedback loop, but the body only has one major hormone that lowers blood sugar, insulin.
Right.
But if you look at the other side, the body has at least 4 major hormones that can raise blood sugar. You've got glucagon plus epinephrine, cortisol, and growth hormone. Why is our biology so heavily armed to push blood sugar up, but only has one tool to pull it down?
That asymmetry tells us everything about human evolution.
How so?
Well, for millions of years, our ancestors faced chronic starvation as a daily existential threat. Chronic overabundance of highly processed food. That environment just didn't exist.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so human biology built in a massive amount of redundancy to guard against blood sugar running dangerously low. If your blood sugar drops to 0, the brain shuts down and you die in minutes.
Wow.
If your blood sugar runs a little high, that is a slow-burning problem that takes years to cause damage. We are evolutionarily biased toward keeping fuel in the blood at all costs.
Which explains so much about diabetes. Like, if type 1 diabetes is the insulin factory completely burning down, type 2 diabetes sounds more like the factory is still producing the keys, but the locks on all the doors have completely rusted shut.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. The critical distinction between type 1 and type 2 diabetes is that they are mechanistically entirely different diseases, even though they both result in high blood sugar.
Right. Because type 1 is an autoimmune condition. The body's own immune system makes a catastrophic error and attacks those tiny beta cells in the pancreas, permanently destroying them.
Exactly.
That leaves the body with an absolute zero deficiency of insulin. That's what Leonard Thompson had.
Yes. Whereas type 2 is a disease of insulin resistance.
Hmm.
The beta cells are still making insulin. Sometimes they're actually pumping out massive, elevated amounts of it.
Really?
Yeah. But the receptors on the muscle, fat, and liver cells, they just stop responding to the signal.
Doors won't open.
Exactly.
So the pancreas tries to force the issue by shouting louder, pumping out more and more insulin. And eventually, after years of this desperate overwork, the beta cells exhaust themselves and begin to fail.
And this completely debunks the widespread myth that eating a piece of candy directly gives you diabetes through some simple chemical reaction.
Right.
Diet and body composition heavily influence your risk for the cellular resistance seen in type 2. But it is a complex failure of biological signaling, not just sugar goes in, diabetes comes out.
And because the mechanisms are different, the treatments are different. Type 1 requires external insulin from day 1 to survive. Type 2 treatment often starts with lifestyle interventions or non-insulin medications to scrub the rust off those locks, so to speak, and improve cellular sensitivity.
Right. And, the sources also point out a wild medical debate that lasted for decades regarding treatment.
Oh, right, the blood sugar debate.
Yeah. Even after insulin was widely available, doctors genuinely didn't know if keeping blood sugar perfectly normal mattered.
Which is crazy to think about now.
It is. Some argued you just needed to give patients enough insulin to prevent them from going into a coma, and that constantly fluctuating high blood sugar was basically harmless.
That debate wasn't settled until 1993 with the Diabetes Control and Complications Trial, or the DCCT.
Such an important trial.
It was a monumental paradigm shift. They meticulously followed over 1,400 people with type 1 diabetes and unequivocally proved that tightly managing insulin doses to keep blood glucose as close to normal as possible reduced the risk of devastating long-term complications.
Yeah, things like blindness, kidney failure, and nerve damage.
By an astonishing 50 to 76%.
Which is massive. It proved that the chronic high blood sugar itself is a toxin that shreds the vascular system over time.
But wait, so is glucagon really just insulin's minor sidekick then in the medical world?
Oh, not at all. Glucagon has actually gone from being viewed as a lab contaminant to a crucial modern therapeutic tool.
Really?
Yeah. Specifically as an emergency rescue injection, or now a nasal spray for severe hypoglycemia when a patient is unconscious. It forcefully tells the liver to dump all its stored sugar to wake them up.
That's incredible. But, understanding the intense stakes of that blood sugar tightrope makes you realize just how potent these hormones are, because insulin is essentially a master key that forces cells to pull sugar out of the blood, stripping the brain of its only fuel source if used incorrectly.
It is very dangerous in the wrong context.
Exactly. That biochemical reality actually turned a life-saving miracle into an almost undetectable weapon.
The forensic biology surrounding this is incredibly gripping.
Oh, it's wild.
Yeah, a massive overdose of insulin in a person without diabetes induces fatal hypoglycemia.
Right.
The brain is just starved of energy. And for a long time, this was notoriously difficult to detect during a standard autopsy. It was exploited by serial killers in the medical field, most famously a nurse named Charles Cullen.
Right.
He used unauthorized insulin injections to quietly murder dozens of patients across hospitals in New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
But the way modern forensic investigators catch this now is brilliant. It all comes down to a tiny chemical fragment called C-peptide.
Right.
When your beta cells manufacture natural insulin, it initially starts as a larger inactive molecule called proinsulin. To activate it, the cell physically snips off a connecting chunk of the molecule. That discarded piece is C-peptide. It gets released into the blood right alongside the natural insulin.
It essentially serves as a biological proof of purchase.
Exactly. It's like a store receipt. If you walk out of a store with a high-end product, but you don't have the receipt, it implies the product was stolen. In this case, pharmaceutical insulin, the kind found on a hospital vial, has been heavily purified.
Right.
So the C-peptide has been completely scrubbed out.
So if a forensic toxicologist draws blood and finds massively high, lethal levels of insulin, but virtually zero C-peptide,
Right.
it is an airtight biological footprint. It proves the insulin did not come from the patient's own pancreas. It had to be injected externally.
I mean, my mind is blown by that. The body literally leaves its own chemical fingerprint on natural insulin.
It's amazing. And this deep molecular understanding of the insulin-glucagon axis, it isn't just for solving crimes, right?
Right, right.
It is the exact operating logic behind the most talked about medical marvels of our current decade. Roughly 1 in 10 Americans currently lives with diabetes, and the technology scaling up to manage it is mind-blowing.
Oh, like the artificial pancreas.
Exactly. These are automated wearable systems that close the loop.
How do they work?
Well, a sensor continuously reads the patient's glucose levels in real time and feeds that data into an algorithm. The algorithm predicts where the blood sugar is heading and automatically tells a worn pump exactly how much insulin to deliver minute by minute. It is basically an algorithmic recreation of that beta cell Rube Goldberg machine.
That is so cool. And we cannot talk about modern marvels without mentioning the explosion of GLP-1 receptor agonist drugs like semaglutide. I mean, they seem to be everywhere right now.
They really are. And their mechanism ties right back to our digestive factory floor. These drugs lean on the incretin pathway.
Incretin.
Yeah. Incretins are hormones naturally released from your gut the moment you start eating. They travel to the pancreas and prime the beta cells, essentially saying, food is coming, get the insulin ready.
Okay, that makes sense.
Modern GLP-1 drugs synthetically mimic this exact biological signal to naturally amplify insulin secretion and heavily regulate appetite in the brain.
We have truly gone from Paul Langerhans staring at mysterious pale clumps in 1869 to flies swarming dog urine in 1889 to Leonard Thompson's miraculous recovery in Toronto, all the way to artificial pancreas algorithms and GLP-1 medications fundamentally altering modern medicine.
It's quite a trajectory.
It is a breathtaking journey of uncovering this deeply elegant beta and alpha cell tug-of-war that is quietly happening inside all of us every single day.
It really is the definitive science of how we fuel our existence.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the pancreas. We've explored the factory floor, the hidden security room, and the incredible history of how we learn to read our body's energy grid. But before we go, we want to leave you with something to chew on.
Yeah, it brings us back to that massive evolutionary asymmetry we uncovered earlier.
Right, the 4-to-1 ratio.
Exactly. Given that our bodies evolved over millions of years with an overwhelming biochemical bias toward preventing starvation, arming us with multiple hormones to raise blood sugar, but only one to lower it, how might this ancient, deeply ingrained survival mechanism be fundamentally clashing with our 21st century environment of constant 247 food abundance?
It's a great question to ponder. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.